Today we're here in the heart of European Parliament, welcoming you. Thank you for watching us. And again, we have our program Ask MEP. Today we are with the MEP Janice Atkinson, asking her about a very hot subject, Greece. Janice Atkinson, you have been to Greece lately, and not just to Greece, not just to Athens, not just to the Parliament there, but also you visited the camps of migrants, and it's a very problematic issue and very problematic place. Why did you go there first place?
Okay, well, I'm on the Libe committee, which deals with justice, home affairs and immigration. And I thought it's the most important thing that's actually facing our continent at the moment, apart from the Greek crisis and the debt crisis, which is actually interlinked with the migrant crisis. So it's okay that to take recommendations by politicians, and we're voting on this, and our voters, we've got Brexit coming up. I actually wanted to see the migrant crisis at first hand. And this place says that we should have quotas. I wanted to go and see who the people are in the camps. Are they migrants? Are they refugees? Or are they asylum seekers? There's three categories there. I want to speak to the NGOs and the charities on the ground. I want to speak to the Greeks about how it's affecting them. I went to a hotspot, which is a migrant camp. I went to another camp which is a detention centre, but it's also a processing centre, and we went to another camp for vulnerable refugees, which was interesting itself. So I saw the three types of hotspots and camps there, and happy to talk about those findings.
All right, so what's the difference actually? Because you say there are different categories, there are migrants and refugees, etc. But do Greek distinguish between them, or do socialists who also represented here, and the leader of your delegation was a socialist, Mr. Niedermüller, do they distinguish it like that? Because what we hear here, that everybody is a refugee.
Yeah, absolutely. The language that is used is very interesting, because not only do I travel to Greece, I go to Calais quite a lot. I think I'm the only parliamentarian here, and indeed my country, that has visited Greece and knows a lot about Calais, because it's opposite my constituency. And the language in here is refugees. That's the language of the charities and the NGOs, or as I call them, the human rights industry, who are working in direct opposition to what my voters want and what we see on the ground. So when we arrived, Peter Niedermüller, who's a Hungarian socialist, he was the leader of the Libe delegation. There were two socialists there. There was one MEP from the ECR, EFDD, me, and there were three ladies from the EPP as well. Now, the first meeting we went to was to meet the NGOs. So there was MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, UNHCR, Samaritan's Purse, David Miliband's outfit called International Rescue. They were all there. There must have been 30 in a room. And we were given a briefing by them. And then Mr. Niedermüller, it's the first time I'd met him and the first time we'd all been together, because we just arrived. And he stated to the NGOs that we are all collectively in the Parliament and the MEPs in this room working towards open borders. We want open borders. We are pushing the Commission. The message must go out. I was pretty horrified at this, and I know the ladies from the ECR and the EFDD, and I said, do you understand what he just said here? He's promoting open borders. I said, there's going to be trouble if that message goes back into the camp. So then I said to the NGOs, what are you telling the migrants here, or the refugees, or the asylum seekers? Well, we're not telling them anything, because that's down to you, the politicians. I said, well, are the politicians actually delivering a message here? Well, the migrants know that the borders are closed, and that's made them very angry. I said, but are they expecting the borders to open anytime soon? Oh, yes, absolutely. And I said, well, the message must go out. The borders will not open. The borders are not going to open. This is how things are now. There's going to be repatriation, and those genuine asylum seekers are very, very welcome into my country. So Mr. Niedermüller was told that he cannot express these very socialist views. Now, I spoke to quite a number of NGOs after that and said, well, what would be the effect of Mr. Niedermüller's message going into the migrant camps? There'll be riots. We've already had riots. They're very angry with the EU. They're very angry with politicians and particularly MEPs. So much so, but when we go to a camp tomorrow, you can only go in groups of 5 because we're frightened for your safety. We must tell you this.
About safety, so how you would evaluate the situation with funds, because as we know, some are aid organizations, some international agencies, they rejected to work in the camps under the pretext that people are detained there. So what is your take? What have you seen there?
Well, I'd read in the British press, in the Times actually, that Médecins Sans Frontières and UNHCR had withdrawn their aid in a certain camp. So they were very political, MSF. We don't believe in barriers, we don't believe in borders, you've got to take this down. I said, well, that's not going to happen in our countries. The barriers are going up because actually this place is incapable of making a decision. Then we went down into the camps and I met some Greek representatives who are brilliant, doing a really, really hard job. So the Greeks are basically running a lot of the camps, aided by the human rights industry. They said to me they felt appalled, absolutely disgusted that MSF had walked off one site. They took 3 doctors with them, they took psychiatrists, they took people who counselled people that had been through trauma, they took nurses away from that site. So what I called for is for their funds to be taken away from them. We should withdraw the British taxpayers, the European taxpayers' funds from them, and that money should then be delivered to the Greeks who are actually delivering services under extreme stress.
So what about funds? So now they continue to receive, these aid groups, they continue to receive funds for services they don't provide. Is that the situation?
Well, they've had £500 million. The Greeks, on the whole, the taxpayers of Europe have thrown £1 billion at this. The Greeks have actually received €500 million. Now, where's the money gone? That's my question to them. What I also said in the Greek Parliament, and I said to the Greeks on the ground and the other politicians that we met, why does Greece, as a NATO member, have the highest defence spending in Europe? 2.3% of GDP is spent on defence. Now, you're either at war with Turkey or you're not at war with Turkey, and the message that I got loud and strong was that we want you to sign the EU-Turkey deal, but you're at war with them. We want Turkey to join the EU, but hold on, this is this country you're at war with, and you're spending 2.3% of your GDP, but you have had a bailout from the rest of the taxpayers, and you want another 6 billion, which was handed over to them yesterday. On top of that, they say they can't control their borders, and I said, but you have 240 Coast Guard vessels. My country only has 5, 2 of which are actually on secondment in the Mediterranean. So you've got 240 Hellenic Coast Guards, you spend 2.3% of GDP on defence, and you've got 50% youth unemployment and 30% ordinary unemployment. Why are you not training your people to work in these camps rather than expecting the Western countries who can't afford to lose their interpreters, because they're asking for interpreters, who can't afford to lose their own doctors and their own asylum processing clerks and professionals. That's what they're asking us to do, whereas they've got this enormous unemployment. They should be doing that. All I heard from, let's talk about the people on the ground first of all. The Greeks on the ground are doing a fantastic job. They're tearing their hair out. They're frustrated. They're frustrated with the human rights industry, they're frustrated with their government, and they're frustrated with politicians here because they're having to deal with the realities of very traumatised people. Very, very traumatised people. They're also having to deal with, and another thing that made them very angry was that the human rights industry keeps talking about you are being called a refugee. Well, no, actually he's an economic migrant, and I've had this argument with the Red Cross up in Calais. They enable the migrants, the economic migrants, to become refugees. They tell them what to do. We know they lose their documents en route, they're told to do that. Don't have fingerprinting, so therefore we can move you on. The Greeks are very, very frustrated at this. And then the human rights industry don't believe in repatriating the migrants back to the country they came from. So, what do we do? We discussed how we deal with them.
Janice Atkinson, just to interrupt, there was this idea, do you believe that the deal between the EU and Turkish government on repatriation of our migrants will work, or it works there? What's the opinion there in the camps? Will it really help this deal?
No, because you've got migrants, that those that arrived pre-20th of March they're being processed and dealt with in a completely different way. And then you've got the migrants that arrive post 20th of March, and they're part of the EU-Turkey agreement. But it's fraught with problems because Turkey, they have prevented quite a lot of migrants coming through the Balkan route and through Macedonia, etc., and just a short hop from the Greek islands. But as we saw in today's Daily Mail and the Telegraph, there were 2,500 that came from Africa. So for the moment, the route is cut off. But we know that according to a UN report, there's 10 million more poised on our borders. So it's not just a case of processing 50,000 migrants that are stuck on Greece at the moment and can be repatriated or sent through for asylum process. It's not just those 50,000 and the few thousand that are dotted around the islands. There is the millions more that are coming through. And my point is, it's not just an EU problem. This is not just about doing a dirty blackmail deal with Turkey. This is about the Middle East stepping up to the plate and taking their responsibility. Saudi Arabia has not put a single pound over. Kuwait, Qatar, they haven't taken a single migrant. They have got to step up to the plate and take their responsibilities because the majority of them are Muslim. They should be that they should be allowed to pursue their own culture and their own identities in their own region. Because when Syria is safer to go back, they need those doctors, dentists, teachers, those professional people to go back. Because what is not often spoken about is that the average asylum seeker or refugee spends around 17 years out of their country. Now, whether you are 5 or 15, that's a whole generation. That's 2 generations actually that won't go back to their own country, and that's a tragedy. So if we keep them nearer their own borders, then it's easier to send them back to actually rescue their own country and rebuild it.
Janice Atkinson, are now very frequent. There are frequent talks about Syrians. That if you look really closer, you see that there are 40 conflicts in the world, and there are around 30 million around European borders, and in sub-Saharan Africa, etc. They say it's around 60 million people who might be considered as refugees or displaced or internally displaced. So where is the strategy? Do you think that EPP, Christian Democrats, Socialists, they expect European population to intake all these people, although we respect their sufferings? Where's the strategy? Because it's a problem to see how on long term it will work. Because if you remember, Angela Merkel said that multicultural model in Germany failed. She said that in 2004, addressing youth in Potsdam, and suddenly she took a decision to open gates, open borders. Actually, we see that Dublin doesn't work anymore. It's not applied because migrants can choose the country where they can stay. So what is your solution for the migrant problem? How you see that? What should be the strategy?
Okay, right, we can't police the world. The UK can't, and the EU can't, and actually doesn't have a mandate to do it. It's up to the nation states to have influence where they can. The Middle East has to step up to the plate. We've got the meddling of Saudi Arabia and the interest in Iran that is causing problems in Syria. The West need to grow up, stop imposing sanctions on Putin and get round the table with him. The noises that are coming out of America is all very anti-Putin, anti-Russia. I hear some good voices coming out from the Trump camp. So I think we'll have a bit of common sense come November if Trump gets into the presidency. Vast amounts of aid is spent in Africa. At the moment, this place causes poverty in Africa because of the free trade agreements that we have with certain countries around the world, and we've got trade barriers with Africa. So that actually keeps Africans in poverty. My country, we trade from around the world, we've still got the Commonwealth. Now, a lot of those Commonwealth countries can't sell their sugar to Britain without big trade barriers. So that's causing poverty in countries around the world. So you can address that by doing that. Now, my country is the biggest contributor to foreign aid. We give 1.7 or 0.7% of GDP. We're the highest contributor in the world. Last year, this place told us we have to give an extra billion to this place to actually hand out around the world. If we spend aid better and we trade better rather than this big bureaucratic process that delivering which doesn't do anything well around the world, then that would alleviate some of the world's problems. But also the message that came loud and clear from not only just the aid agencies but the Greeks as well was, why the politicians not speaking louder in these countries to try and combat what the people traffickers are now telling the people. You know, there's a bright new world and bright new era for you living in Europe. Well, it's not. The message has got to go out loud and clear, is that we don't have the space. In my country, we don't have the houses, we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the school places, and we don't have the jobs, actually. So don't bother coming to the UK, but we will choose to allow the people that we want in for the jobs and the people that can stand on their own 2 feet. But we're not closing our door to those who are genuine asylum seekers, and those are the people that are being locked out at the moment. That's not a simple answer, but the message that goes out from this place and also Peter Niedermüller is that, you know, we should be just welcoming 50,000 refugees. Well, it isn't just 50,000. It isn't just the quotas. And because of this sclerotic way that this Parliament deals with things, saying you are going to have quotas, and if you don't have your quotas, like Poland and Hungary and other countries, especially the Visegrad countries, we are going to impose super fines on you. And what happens? The people react to that. They won't be dictated to by those people sitting in there. So there's such knock-on effects for all of this. And you know what the ENF proposes, many of us in our group, and certainly in the UK, is that we want an Australian points-based system. And it's as simple as that. But the message that's got to go out loud and clear, which is not going out loud and clear, especially from the Peter Niedermüllers of this world, our borders are closed. We cannot cope with this. Please do not come. We're able to help you. We will help negotiate peace deals via your governments. We're happy to give you aid when you're completely in need. But please, we can't cope.
Janice Atkinson, thank you very much. I think we're running out of time and we have to wrap up our discussion with you. But of course, it's not the end of the dialogue, because you have your Twitter, you have Facebook. So please continue to ask questions, because it's for you, it's for asking questions, it's for public, it's for electorate. Our Janice Atkinson MEP on the Facebook and on Twitter. And thank you for watching us. We hope to see you with us next time.